Hi everyone, I'm Mike Umto of Big Bear Photography, where we capture the beauty of everyday nature. Before we dive into today's video, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a new video that I post. So, what is this Toon Artist thing that I've been talking about? Have you ever wanted to take everyday photos and turn them into stunning cartoon-style digital artwork? I can show you how to do that with the Toon Artist Action in Photoshop. It makes it super quick and easy. And it's fully customizable. You get adjustable layers, detailed effects, stunning color settings, plus it works with all kinds of photos. Portraits, landscapes, wildlife, birds, even your pets. Whether you're a digital artist or you just want to have kind of some fun as a hobby photographer with some of your photos, the Toon Artist Action is worth some of your time just to check out in Photoshop to see if it might be something you want to play around with. Are you ready to get started? Stick around for the full tutorial and I'll show you how it works. Alright, let's go.
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about with the Toon Artist Action here in Photoshop is just how you install it. So I'm going to include a URL in the description for it's a link to Adobe where you can download this action. So basically the installation process is pretty basic. All you need to do is download the file. It's just a zip file. You unzip it, and once it's unzipped you click on each file that's in there. So there's 3 files. There's 2 of them you have to click on. There's an action file and then there's a pattern file. Double click each of them. They should automatically load into Photoshop for you. And then you can validate that they're loaded by going into Photoshop, and you can look under Window and then open up your actions. And when you open up your actions, you should see a Toon Artist Photoshop action loaded. And then you should also see the corresponding Toon Artist patterns as well. So if you go to Window and down to Patterns, it's going to, oh, I just closed mine, had them open. If you open up your patterns here on the side, you can see there's also these Toon Artist patterns. And the ones that are preloaded are good enough to start playing around with, but you can add your own custom patterns in here as well. So that's kind of the installation process. Like I said, I'll include a link down below so that you guys can find that really easily. But once we got everything loaded up, the tool is pretty quick and easy to start using. You can see here's kind of a render that I did just earlier tonight. This is a younger picture of my now 12-year-old black lab. So this is when she was much younger. I think she was probably about 3 or so in this picture. But here is, if I go down to my layers, there's a Toon Artist layer. If I were to unhide that, here's a picture of the black lab Stella. She is this was in the middle of winter, and this was at her old house in the middle of winter, and I remember she was pretty bummed out on this day because she wanted to play ball, and it was so cold outside we could not play ball because it was a chilly day in Wisconsin. But I did take this nice picture of her. And yeah, so once the Toon Artist Action runs, you can see this is what it converts it to. I've modified this a little bit. I played with some of the layers in here. We'll cover all that in a little bit, but just wanted to kind of show you what a finished product can kind of look like. And it's really quick and pretty easy to get to this end result after you play around with this for a little bit. I've messed around with this tool now for maybe a few hours altogether in total, but it is, like I said, it's pretty easy to use. So I'm going to do one from scratch just to show you guys how this works. So we got everything set up, installed. Now the setup before we can actually run the action. So I'm going to go to a different photo I have loaded here. So I have a picture of my daughter. This was taken almost I think just about a year ago actually. So this is Kohler Andre State Park in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And it was just a nice picture that I got of her in that day that we went out on a hike in the winter. But what we have to do is we have to select the subject, the object that we want to render as a cartoon. So we have the background, we have our subject. This one's a really good example, I think, because we have a really nice in focus subject. So what I need to do is select, or what I find the easiest way to select the subject is to use the object selection tool. And then you can see right away, Photoshop knows exactly what I want to grab. So click on my daughter. And then once I have that, I want to go ahead and select and mask. And then after I click on that, I want to go down here and it says output to. I want to output to a new layer. Click OK. So now I got two layers. I got my original background and I got my subject. Now if I don't highlight the background, then I won't get a background to like an original background rendering. That's kind of cool. I like the original background renders. Oftentimes I think they're kind of better than not. Ooh, I can also see, so it did not want to select her. She had kind of like this toy camera with her. It did not want to select that for the subject. So that's kind of one of the things you got to watch out for. So I'm actually gonna redo this because I don't like the fact that that it didn't select the camera as part of the subject. I want that to be part of the rendering. So I am actually going to delete this layer and I'm going to start over. So let's see. Delete the layer. Okay. So we're going to start over here. I'm going to go, I got my object selection tool. I'm going to select my daughter. And then what I'm going to do is just hold the shift key and then take a square over the top of the camera so that it will select that too. And now I'm going to go to this select and mask and output to a new layer again. Click OK. All right, there we go. So now I got my background, I got my subject. They're in two separate layers. I'm going to make sure that I select the background because I do want it to render the background as a potential cartoon background. If I don't select that, I won't get that option. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that's checked. That kind of confused me the first few times I used the tool. I could not understand why I could not get the background to render in the digital rendering to have that option. But you have to make sure that you select the background before you run the action. So now all I have to do is run the action. So I can go here, click Actions. Here's Toon Artist. Just highlight it, click Play. And it starts doing a series of tasks. Now it's going through and it's running each action that's in here. And you could, step through all these actions and you could, dive into them if you want. And I haven't paid attention a whole lot to what each specific action is, but it's going through and it's making this digital rendition of my daughter here, and we'll get a cartoon image. And you can see it kind of gives you an updated state as it goes. So right now it looks kind of goofy because it's in this like halfway rendered state, but when it finishes, it may look good. Some of the samples that I've done with this have looked pretty cool. And other ones that I've ran through of, people, pets, some of the photography stuff that I've done with like birds. Some of them look great. Some of them you kind of just shrug and say, could have been better. And that's okay. That's kind of the fun of it, is just kind of, you have an idea to see what it will look like and then you just want to test it out. So the amount of time that it takes, it can take a little while to actually go through and have the actions finish. So we'll see how long this process takes here, but hopefully it doesn't take too long. I'd like to do at least one or two of these. Oh, I think it's getting close. It's applying the background effects. There we go. So now it's completed. You can just click continue. I'm going to close the action panel here on the side, and actually I'm going to just make this a hint bigger because we're going to spend some time looking at the layers. Actually close that so we can open the layers. Okay, so on the side here you'll notice there are some layers there. The first one that you'll see here is kind of this text layer. So, you know, it says Toon Artist, Photoshop, Action. You can customize this. So if you double click on this, it will open up the text and you can change the text to be something else. In this case, you know, I don't really want text part of this, but if I did, you know, that's an option I have. I'm gonna hide that. And then there's a number of effects to go through. So it adds this white border by default. I don't know if you like a bordered image, that's kind of nice, but I just find that I don't really care for them. There is hue, saturation, and color levels. Sometimes I play around with these, but I don't tend to do that right away. Actually, I tend to kind of go through some of this other stuff first. Here's some foreground effects, so particles, and a lot of times if you're just wondering to see like what they do, you can just kind of toggle them and it will kind of show you exactly what they're doing. In this case, you know, then some of them are really faint and even hard to see. Here's a line effect, so you can see that adds a white line kind of around my daughter. It's like a white, kind of almost cartoonish sort of line. There's a line 2 effect. It's just a black line instead of a white line. There's these little drops. They tend to be kind of heavy around the outer image of the subject. I actually kind of prefer to remove those. There's details, so you can kind of go through here and you can kind of play around with, you know, if there's certain highlights that you want to get rid of or sharpening that you want to remove, you can play around with all that. There's a Toon Lines group, so you can, you know, add or remove shadows. You got a couple different of these line effects. The third one, I think I kind of prefer that off. Here is an outline, so if you have this highlighted, you'll see there's kind of that, kind of adds like a black line, and this one is kind of a white outline around my daughter. I'm not sure if I'll leave these here or not. For now I'm going to leave them, but I may turn those off. Here's the actual coloring, so you can play with the color levels and the color saturation. I'm not going to mess with that right now, just quite yet. What I do like to kind of mess around with is this. So there's this border hatching effect. It's like this. Can't see it as much as this, but you see it a little bit up in here. It's kind of like this sort of netting effect. I actually don't tend to care for that, so I'm going to remove it. They have some ripple effects. They just kind of adds this like that. It's kind of hard to see because there's these paint splotches that they add, and actually that's almost usually the first thing that I remove. Sometimes the paint splotch effect can be really, really cool, but oftentimes it's a little gaudy. So I tend to just remove it, at least at first, so that I can see what else I'm dealing with here. And then it becomes a little bit easier to mess around with. There's some like fragment pieces in the background. Sometimes those look kind of cool. And this is where you can see, so here's the background effects. This is where you can kind of really customize some stuff. So if I wanted to change the pattern, I could do that. So I could add another pattern, or I could remove the original pattern, and then there's like nothing in the background. They got all these different types of patterns preloaded that you can play around with. You know, circle effects, geometric shapes. like I said, sometimes those are really cool, but oftentimes I like to see what the original background looks like. So in this case, I kind of like that original I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on the effect you want, right? Like sometimes the pattern might be kind of a cool effect, depending on what you want to do with it. I actually kind of like that because the trees look kind of nice, so I sort of like the background the way that it's rendered here, and I'm going to leave that original background on. And then from there, I'm going to just play around with a few other things, like the line effects. Oh, I might have went past them. Here we go. Outline 1 and outline 2. I just wanted to... So if I turn both of those off, you can see the black one's just very subtle and almost unnoticeable. Probably unless you have the white. Yeah, you really notice it with that white outline. So, you know, this is just kind of, you're playing around with the settings, determining what you actually like. I think in this case, I don't know. You'll have to tell, you guys will have to tell me what you guys prefer, but I kind of think I prefer it maybe with just the black outline. I don't know that I want to use the white outline. It's just kind of adds an interesting effect, but I think I'm going to skip that. And then they had those ripple effects that's down here. So if I wanted to remove some of these ripple effects that are showing like that, but I kind of like that. I think that's kind of cool. So I'm going to leave that on there for now. And then we can start playing around with the color levels a little bit. So you'll see up here, you get a little bit, I'm going to move myself down here. So you can start playing around with the color settings here. You know, if you want to kind of either darken or lighten, that's all possible. I want to be kind of careful with what I do. But that's one of the effects. You can also play around with the saturation. And, you know, you just slide it one way or the other way and kind of mess around with it to see what you want to do. But I think I'm going to leave that zeroed out. There's not much to play with on this one. It looks pretty good the way that it auto set it. The other thing you can do is you can play around with the color. So higher up, there's another hue and saturation slider, and that's kind of the same deal. You just kind of, you know, you can kind of subtly mess around with it to see if you want to adjust anything, but I'm going to pretty much leave that intact. But you get the point. You can really mess around and play with this stuff, and this is just, you know, a really quick kind of tutorial on it, so you can really dive deep and really play around with the settings, and you can change kind of the lines and, you know, the opacity of the lines, the thickness, all that kind of stuff is totally within your means to change. Certainly there are other people out there that are far more well versed in Photoshop than I am. I'm just a pure hobbyist, pretty much. I use Photoshop a little bit here and there for some of the photography stuff I dabble with, but that's pretty much about it. But I think this is, you know, kind of a cool little effect, or a cool image that you can pull out of this just with a really quick conversion. And that's, you know, this is like more of a portrait. You can do the same thing with, you know, a wildlife. So if you have, like, in this case, I have a deer, or in this picture, I have a really nice barred owl. These were two other ones that I was considering playing around with. I don't know how well the deer will work, because this picture of this white-tailed buck was very kind of faint. but this is one I was gonna try to test out here, so I might do that one right away too, and just see what happens. So again, I'm gonna go find, we'll do this one more time for sure. I'll grab my object selection tool. Photoshop did not disappoint me here. Selects the subject. Go ahead and select and mask, and we're going to output that to a new layer again. Click OK. Make sure we click on that to grab the background. Go to our actions, click play, and we'll let it do its thing and render. This will take a little bit of time. Be interesting to see what this one looks like. So this was a really cool whitetail buck that I actually kicked up on a hike in, it was the Trampers Trail on Star Lake. Actually, it's between Star Lake and Plum Lake in Vilas County near Sainer, Wisconsin. So pretty far up in the north woods of Wisconsin. And on my way back, so the way that I hike the Trampers Trails, I always hike out to a little bit of a peninsula on Plum Lake, and there's a little canoe remote site out there. It's kind of a fun hike. I like to do that one at least once a year. But on the way back, I kicked up a deer, and it's like this really beautiful kind of mature hardwoods area. In fact, if you ever get a chance to hike out there, it's kind of one of those spots where, at least what I've read about it is, it's like, you know, so mature. The woods are so mature back there that it's basically untouched since, you know, maybe a wildfire back in the 1700s or something like that. It's pretty wild how mature some of those trees are back there. But yeah, it's this whitetail buck, I kicked it up and it ran just barely out of sight, and I thought it was gone, but I had my camera in my hands, and I happened to be staring off in the distance, and I saw it just peeking its head over a dead log, a deadfall, and it was just staring right at me about, I don't know, pretty far away. It was probably like 100 yards away or something. It was far enough that it was not really great. It wasn't very sharp, but image that I got of it, but it was still kind of cool. So anyway, it was a fun story. All right, so let's see here. I'm going to close the action, and you can see it's, you know, it doesn't look like much right now. But where I think this one really might look cool is with the background. I don't think it's going to look cool, obviously, with just like the tradition. There's not a huge subject to focus on. So I'm going to remove the text again and probably just kind of do a lot of the same stuff. I'm not going to take quite as much time to explain everything that I'm going to do here, because I kind of showed you guys that in depth the first time. But I'm just going to remove the paint splash. I might leave the fragments in there for now. The original background is actually what I want to see. I wanted to see how cool that looks with the original background. Yeah, you know, I don't know that this one is that cool compared to the original, but we'll see. I'm going to mess around with a few other things in here yet. The outlines, I'm going to remove those. And I think I'm also going to remove those drops. And I think I'm going to remove that line effect. And I got to remove that hatching. There's like a hatching effect, border hatching, that's got to go. And I may even remove the ripple effects here. I might just really strip this one down to bare bones. Yeah. It is interesting. Maybe I'll leave some of the rippling. There we go. Maybe something like that. And the other thing I could do is I could try to remove the fragments. I don't know if I like the fragments in this picture or not. I might leave them in there. Yeah, that's probably all I'm going to do with this one for now. I mean, it's like I said, some of these images you think they might look cool, and then you render them and they're like, it's not that great. But in this case, I think it's all right. So I'm gonna leave this one alone. It was kind of a fun little experiment. And then the last one, I might do this owl right away and just see what we get, because this one might look really cool. So we'll grab that. Again, we're just gonna select a mask. I'll put to a new layer. Click OK. Select the background. Run our action set and let it go. This one might take a little bit, but it will be interesting to see this. So, kind of giving you guys a good glimpse of, you know, a portrait shot, kind of a more of a land. I would say that whitetail buck is more of a landscape shot almost. And then this last one here is just a nice kind of barred owl perched up in a pine tree. So we'll see what this looks like too. The barred owl here, this was a recent picture I got. It was actually back in December that I captured the barred owl, and it was kind of completely unexpected, middle of the day. Was not expecting to see an owl at all, but happened to just kind of spook it up. It must have been nestled up in a tree right underneath me on the trail, and it swooped down right in front of me. I grabbed my camera and just kind of peeked right off the trail, kind of under some thick brush, and as soon as I popped up on the other side of it, it was just staring right at me, and it gave me just enough time to get the camera up and take a few quick pictures right before it just took off for the hills and I didn't see it again. But still really, really cool. That was probably the best owl shot in terms of like sharpness and light and just the middle of the day being right there. It was such a cool experience. So that one was a really, really fun picture to get, and totally unexpected. Was not expecting to see that, of course, because it was kind of the middle of the day. I think it was like, I don't know, 2 in the afternoon or something. Sun was out full, so you just never expect to see a barred owl like that in the middle of the day. All right, let's see if this thing's almost done rendering here. Every once in a while, you'll notice that it just takes a little bit more time to render. Sometimes certain pictures I've noticed render fairly quickly, and then other times it will take a little bit more. So I guess it all depends on all the actions that it's running and the effects that it's trying to render under the hood. Okay, so I had to pause that one. It did take a really, really long time to render this one, but it did finally finish. Took several minutes to render, so not terrible, but a little bit longer than some of the other ones we did. This one I thought turned out really, really cool, though. At least I think it's going to be cool. We'll mess around with it here a little bit just to kind of finalize it. The thing that the other thing I was going to mention is there are times where you're rendering this, and sometimes it can't always apply every effect or every action, I guess. So you'll get these little prompts that pop up, and you'll have to just click continue to go through them. But I've noticed it still tends to work pretty good. It's not like I've noticed anything odd with the end result or anything. It just seems like there are certain actions it has a hard time rendering, and when that happens, you just have to click continue, and you might have to do that several times in the process. I had to with this one, so I mean it still worked. I still got an end result, but just something to be aware of. Anyway, I'm going to continue here. close my action panel. And yeah, so here's kind of their end result. You know, again, I'm not sure that I'm crazy about the background pattern, but some of the background patterns are kind of cool. I'm going to remove the text and the border off the bat. I'm not going to play around with any of the coloring. Maybe because this was a larger subject, there wasn't as many. At least I didn't feel like there was as many. Some of the effects aren't as, they're not as obvious. For example, the border hatching that I usually always almost turn off, it's just really faint. I mean, it's there, but it's really faint. So in this case, it barely even matters to turn it off. The ripple effects too on this one, I mean, there's just not much. I guess that one is a little bit more significant. And I could probably play around with the settings of the ripple effect, I guess, if I really wanted to play around with that. But I am kind of curious. The one thing I'm always usually first curious about is what does the original background look like? And in this case, I mean, that original background looks pretty cool. With the pine, because it was like on a pine tree background with the blue sky. But you know, the pattern effects can look really cool too. So I should say in this case, I don't really like the way that the rays look on this one. But you know, you can totally mess around with some of these effects. If you view like the properties of them, you can play around. So in this case, you can play around with like the density, and that will just kind of subtly change things. In this case, you don't notice a ton of change. And the feathering. Ooh. But again, I don't really see a huge difference in this particular case with this one. I'm not going to play around with it too much. In fact, I might just, you know, when I get a subject like this, what I find works well are usually like the straight lines. Those are not really looking great either because they're pretty thin pinstripes. Sometimes the circle effects, like the circle 3 one, can look kind of cool with a subject like this for a background pattern. Or some of those geometric shapes can look pretty cool. You can change the background color as well, I should mention that. So, you know, if you did like one of these background patterns and you wanted to use it, you could change the background color just slightly. It's basically a blend between this color right here of the background color and the pattern that you have selected. So I could double click on this, it opens up the color picker, and then from here I can start to change some things. And you can see if I start moving that around, you know, maybe in this case, maybe I want to do something a little bit more green, like that pine color or something. But you can do whatever you want, you know. So you click on that, and then this background color as well. I can adjust this to be a little bit more of a green if I really wanted to make it like a true green, or I could lighten it up a little bit. I'm not going to keep this background pattern because I do like the original one, but just kind of showing you guys the background color effects and that you can change that. I'm going to go with this original background though, because I like that the best. The other thing I'm going to kill is the outline, the white outline anyway. I don't really think I care for that in this particular case. I may keep the, yeah, that secondary one is very subtle. You can barely even tell it's there. But yeah, so the other thing I might want to mess around with, I might play with this a little bit later. I don't want to keep you guys too long in the video. I think everybody probably gets the point by now about how to use this action and how quick, and hopefully you can see how easy it is to use. But I might play around with just the hue and I might play around with the levels first and then the hue. But beyond that, I think this is shaping up pretty good. So maybe just darken up the background a little bit. Something like that. And then you can play around with the bottom. That's... And then saturation, I might just... maybe just very subtly mess around with that. It's almost kind of, the body right here is blown out a little bit. It's like almost like if you could take this, and I'm sure you could almost do this too. You could probably apply just a mask right here or something. I mean, I'm not going to do that for the purpose of this video, but you guys get the point. So a pretty cool tool overall, very quick and easy to use. And again, here's kind of the before, here's the after effect. So very cool. I actually like the original picture the best here. It's a really beautiful picture of this barred owl, but still pretty cool that you can kind of render this digital rendition of it, and that it's, you know, it's your picture, you took this shot, but it is kind of that, you know, digital sort of art rendition of it. So I just think that's a really cool feature. So my goal again for this is to take these digital renditions. I'm going to take, you know, lots of photos throughout the year like I usually do. And then as I'm going through and do my normal editing process, I'm planning on editing, you know, just a number of these cartoon-like photos. And then my plan is to actually print out a very small cartoon booklet, sort of. I mean, it's not going to be like a cartoon. There's no like real story or anything. But I am going to put them in like a cartoon book like format and style. And that's what I want to get printed out kind of at the end of the year. I just thought that'd be really cool to make something like that and then be able to give it out to family and friends. And who knows, maybe there will be other people interested in either these videos to learn how to do it themselves, or might be interested in wanting to see what the finished product looks like themselves. So we shall see. But that's basically all I have for you. Hopefully you see how, you know, quick and simple this is to kind of turn your photos into these digital art cartoon-like renditions with the Toon Artist Action. And yeah, I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and that hopefully you find it inspiring enough to maybe try it out yourself. It's, again, super easy to use and kind of fun to mess around with. So again, thanks for watching, and keep on creating, stay inspired. I'm Mike Gumto of Big Bear Photography, and we'll see you in the next video update. Thanks.
But remember, don't hesitate to call on me for anything. Like you said, a human being, I'm going to make you take that chance. Things have been different for me ever since I met Hildy. I've never met anyone quite like her.